Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Kaf Ches and Daf Kaf Tes Amud Aleph, and we'll be stopping about 8 or 9 lines from the bottom of the page on Kaf Tes Amud Aleph, and on Shabbos we'll learn the rest. We're in the middle of a machlokes hamoraim about whether or not a person is allowed to be avid inish dina lenafshe, whether or not a person is allowed to take the law into their own hands, as we would say here in American parlance. And what we said is that b'makom pseida, b'makom hefsed, if I'm going to lose something, then I am allowed to physically interrupt what you're doing. And the example of the Gemara is if somebody hits you with a shovel handle or with the shovel head, those things are seemingly allowed if there is a degree of hefsed. However, when it comes to a scenario where there is no hefsed, with you doing something annoying but not a financial hefsed, that's a machlokes hamoraim. Rav Yehuda, this is 12 lines or so from the bottom of the page on Chav Zayin Amud Beis. That's not where we're starting from. We'll get to where we're starting from in a moment. Rav Yehuda was of the opinion that lo avid inish dina lenafshe. Rav Yehuda held that you're not allowed to take the law into your own hands when there's no hefsed, when you're not losing out on any money. Rav Nachman Amar avid inish dina lenafshe. Rav Nachman said you are able to take matters into your own hands even when there's no financial loss. That brings us to our starting point on Kaf Ches Amud Aleph, about 5 or 6 lines down. The Mishnah, the Brisa that's quoted over here says as follows: Toshma, we have a case of shor sha'ala al gabe chavero. One shore attacks and jumps on another shore. Lahorgo, and this shore is the shore that's jumping and attacking from above is the shore that's trying to kill the one underneath. So says the Gemara, Uba bal hatachton, the owner of the shore that's underneath on the bottom, the shamat es shalo, he pulled out his sheep, his cow from underneath the battle, the nafal elyon umes, and in the process of protecting his own shore, he ended up killing the attacking shore. So he's pater. So says the Gemara, my love, isn't it the case b'muad the lake of Pseida? Aren't we talking about a case scenario where the attacking animal is a muad, and therefore there's no pseida? Why is there no hefsed if the animal's muad? Because if the animal's muad and he kills my animal, what do I get as payment? Nezek shalem. Even Stephen, he might kill my animal, but I'm going to get the cash equivalent because the owner of the attacking shore is obligated to pay nezek shalem. So there, what do we see? We see that there's no hefsed, and we see that the person is pater, which implies avid inish dina lenafshe, that a person is allowed to act on his own accord. He's allowed to take the law into his own hands. Says the Gemara, no. Lo. Really, we're talking about a case bitam de ikapseda. Really, the animal that's attacking from above, that's jumping on animal number 1, that's jumping on animal number 2, is actually a tam. And what happens when a tam kills? What's the payment? Chatzi nezek. And because the payment is chatzi nezek, so then in that case there is a hefsed, and that's why, according to this argument, that's why I was allowed to intervene and pull out my animal from under yours, even at the risk of killing yours. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if you really want to say that this brisa is discussing where the attacking shore is a tam, that's a problem, because a maseifa, what does it say in the end of the brisa? Dachfo le'elyon v'meis chayev. If instead of the bal hatachton pulling out his animal from the bottom, let's say he pushes the other animal, which is not his, off the top, there we said chayev. But says the Gemara, v'ibetam, if the attacking animal is a tam, why would we say he's chayev? After all, that's a hefsed. And we should say that for a hefsed, avid inish dina lenafshe, you're allowed to take the law into your own hands. So says the Gemara, shahaya lo l'shamto v'lo shamto. The reason why he's going to be chayev when he pushes off his friend's animal from attacking his is because he shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't push off the other animal. You should pull out your animal. You should take the animal that's being attacked, your animal, and pull him out. And therefore, that's why you were chayev in that case. L'maisa, no raya, one way or the other, in regards to the machlokes of avid inish dina lenafshe, of taking the law into your own hand. So 10, 12 lines down, let's move on to the next argument to try and show us one way or the other. Toshma. Let's say I go into your yard and I fill up every square inch of your backyard with barrels of wine and pitchers of oil. I should say pitchers of wine and pitchers of oil. Bal hachotzer mishaber v'yotze mishaber v'nichnas. I did that in your yard. You can literally kick them out of the way and break them, no problem. Amar, what does that show us? It's no hefset. You're not losing anything. It's just annoying. So we see that I, the Baal Chatzer, am allowed to literally kick your barrels out of the way. No halachic issue whatsoever. Probably not. Probably not. Good question. I have no idea. Just guessing. Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, no. Mishaber v'yotze lebezdin. You're allowed to break them, but only to get out of your yard to go to Bezdin, not because of Avidin Ishtin L'Nafsheh. I can move them, and if they break, they break, just so I can get out of my yard to go to the Bezdin and say, this guy's being ridiculous. He just emptied an 18-wheeler's worth of oil in my backyard. So you're allowed to leave in order to go to Bezdin. And Mishbar v'Nichnas, you're also allowed to break them going back into your property, L'Havi Zechiyosab, to go get paper, to prove yourself. But it's not Stam Avidin Ishtin L'Nafsheh. You're just allowed to move and break things only if it's to the benefit of bringing this case to Bezdin. So therefore, no raya from there. Let's try another argument to see if we can find a tzad that supports either shita of Rabbi Yehuda that lo avidin ishtina lenafshe or of Nachman that avidin ishtina lenafshe. Tashma, quarter of the way down. Minayin lenirtza shekalu lo yamo. Let's say that there's a slave who decided that he wanted to be va'avado le'olam, and he got his ear pierced against the wall. We learned about this in a previous Masechta. His right ear, only men. We discussed what the halachos were then. So he decides that if he's near Shekalu lo yamav, we know that they don't go out after 6 years. They don't go out in the Shemitah, but they do go out in a Yovel. And let's say the Rabo Misarhe Bo, let's say, at the end of the by the time they hit Shemitah cycle, he's ready to kick out his Eved. Goodbye, get out. The Eved doesn't want to leave. He likes his digs. But Virabo Misarhebo, let's say the Rav, the master, is pushing the Eved and saying, your time is up, get out of my house. I'm renting out the room for Airbnb, please leave. It says the Gemara, and while he was doing this, V'choval v'asabo chabura shu pater. How do we know that if the Rav is pushing out his Eved after his servitude of Nirtza, how do we know that if I hurt him, if I'm the Baal, if I hurt my Eved and he gets a chabura, how do I know that I'm pater? Says the Gemara, what's implied from the question? It's implied from the question that even with no hefsid. Why? Because what's the Eved losing? He already lost him. He halachically lost the guy. He's done. He's just kicking him out of his house to get the space back. So that's not a hefsid. Yet we see avidin ishtina lenafshe because he's pater. If lo avidin ishtina lenafshe, then the chabura that he made on this Eved, he should be liable for. Talmud Lomar says the Gemara, lo tikchu kofer lashuv, lo tikchu kofer lashav. That you don't have to make a payment of kofer. This is based on the pasuk. The drasha has nothing to do with the pasuk itself, but the drasha indicates that in our case of a master who's kicking out his eved, who's finished his servitude, that he's going to be pater lo sichu kofer lashav. That you do not have to pay kofer when you're kicking out an animal to go an eved, to go return home. So what do we see over here? Now we see that you don't have to pay anything. Same as before. What do we see? That avidin ishtina lenafshe, I'm allowed to kick you out even though there's no hefsid. The Gemara says 1/3 of the way down, no, there is a hefsid here. And everyone, both Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda, would agree that avidin ishtina lenafshe, because we allow for the intervention of even physical violence of avidin ishtina lenafshe when there's a hefsid. Says the Gemara, what was the hefsid? Hacha b'maya askinan, answer number 1, the avda ganva. The thief is now my Eved. The Eved is now my thief. Every day he's there, he skims money out of my junk drawer. He's a thief. So that makes him a hefsid to me, which means I'm allowed to beat him up. Mutter. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work. Ad ha'idna lo ganav, v'hashta ganav. The guy's been living by you for 49 years. He's an 80-year-old man. All of a sudden he starts skimming off the top. Something doesn't sound right. So says the Gemara, well, ad ha'idna hava aimsa de Rabbi aleh. Up until now, he had the fear of his master on him because that really was his master. Hashta lesle aimsa de Rabbi aleh. Now he's 2 feet out the door. He doesn't mind skimming off the top. So the Gemara says this is actually still a case of hefsed. That's answer number 1. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, and this answer opens a whole can of worms. He says as follows: Amar be'evet shemasar lo rabo shivcha kena'anis. We're dealing with an eved who the master had given the Eved as Shivcha Kenanis. And Ad Ha'idna Hetera. Up until now, up until the time that the Eved gets freed, the Eved's allowed to sleep with the Shivcha. However, Vehashta, now that he's reached the Shemitah year, and even though he was in permanent servitude, as it were, with the Pierce, now he has to go free. That also means he can't sleep with his Shivcha anymore. So what do we see from here? We consider this a hefsid, which means he's allowed to be violent and stop the Eved from living in his house to make sure he doesn't do the Avera of sleeping with the Shivcha, which means that someone in your home not performing a mitzvah is considered a hefsid. And it's implied from our Gemara that you're allowed to physically harm a person. It's not a good idea. It's not the right approach. It's called child abuse, but that we're speaking in legalities right now. Nobody tried this at home, but it might actually be legal that because it's a danger for that person to not keep mitzvos, so you can even force their hand. Again, pedagogically, no, don't try this. It's not the way things actually work, but it might be halachically mutter under the circumstances. Either way, we're still back at square one, which is that we haven't found a raya one way or the other to support the shita of avidin ishtina lenafshe or lo avidin ishtina lenafshe. Let's try again. Halfway down on Kaf Ches Amud Aleph. Tashma hamaniach es hakad b'rshus harabim. Somebody places a pitcher in a public domain. Uba acher, another man shows up. The niskal ba v'shavra, and he trips over it. Let's say you leave something in the public space, and I trip over it and I break it. The halacha is pater. The Gemara makes a deal. Taima, the reason why I'm pater when I trip over it is the niskal ba, because I tripped. However, hashavra, but if I would have broken it on purpose, like if I would have kicked it like a football, you're annoying. You left a jug in the middle of the Rishus Harabim. I take a nice long wind up, like a punt returner's wind up, and I just shatter it to smithereens. Says the Gemara, in that case, you'd be chayiv. So what does that show you? That you're not allowed to be avidin ishtina lenafshe. Because if you were allowed to take matters into your own hands and your kli is in Rishus Harabim, get out of here. You're not allowed to behave that way, and I hereby break it. So the Gemara shows over here that it must be that ein avid inishtina lenafshe or lo avid inishtina lenafshe. Says the Gemara, not necessarily true. Amar of Zvid mishmei de Rava hu adin afilu shavra. Really, in that case, where you leave a kli in Rishus Harabim, I am allowed to go over and kick it like a football and break it into pieces. No problem. If that's true, then why did you say it was a case where he tripped over it? You should have said what you wanted to say, which is shavra. Says the Gemara, that's because I needed to buy the misne seifa. We needed the word niskal for the case of seifa. What was the case of the seifa? Im huzak bal chaves chayiv benisko. That if I get hurt while breaking your item, the only way you'd be chayiv benisko is if it was the dafka niskal. If I kick your pottery, which might be mutter, and I get injured, if I kick it intentionally, that's not on you. The injury is on me. I might be allowed to break it because of avidin ishtina lenafshe. But if I hurt myself while I'm breaking it, no dice, that only applies beniskal. Aval shavar lo, because dehu azik nafshe, you hurt yourself. Therefore, tani reisha niskal. But again, no kasha about avidin ishtina lenafshe, because the only reason we said niskal in the reisha was because we needed it for the seifa, and therefore your diuk is incorrect. Let's try yet again. 2/3 of the way down, still trying to find mari mikomos to support one way or the other the din of avidin ishtina lenafshe or not. Tashma, the katsasa is kappa, that if a woman, in fact, is machzik b'mevushav, if two men are fighting, one is her husband, and she attacks the man attacking her husband by grabbing b'mevushav, his private parts, the din is v'katsasa is kappa. Her hand gets cut off, but not literally. Drasha, momod. Let's be clear. There's a lot going on in the news right now about things that happen in other countries. That's not the din here. We do have a din of skila, but a bezdin achzar by us was once in 70 years. It was extremely rare, and we were yored the sof daito shel adam, that because they had asra, because they had edim, etc., that therefore were shaykh the capital punishment. We have a very organized and rigid system. We need a bezdin, a large bezdin to determine these things. Nisht pasha. Here, we're not even talking about cutting off the hand. What's the drush of the katsosas kappa? Mamon. We cut off her hand, meaning she has to pay money. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't the case where she did this act to stop the fighting. Yet still we see she's getting punished, which shows us even b'makom hefsid, because her husband's getting hurt. Even b'makom hefsid, she's not allowed to be avid inishtin lenafsha. Why can't she be involved in the fight? Her husband's getting pummeled. If she does this act, it will stop the fight. So says the Gemara, aren't we talking about a case where this is her only approach, and therefore we see that even behefsid mamon, we would say lo avidin ishtin lenafshe. That shita doesn't even exist. Gemara says lo really, she had another option. She could have kicked him in the leg. She chose to be machzik b'mavushav. It's effective, but there was another avenue. So therefore, she has to pay the mamonis over here. Asks the Gemara, wait 1 second. Aval, there's a diuk to be made here. Aval eina yachol lahatzal p'tura. Would in fact we say that she's p'tura if there were no other options other than being machzik b'mavushav? Says the Gemara, ihachi, had that been true, then we don't understand the seifa. The Tani seifa, the pasuk says v'shilcha yada, that she sends her hand, meaning she's not allowed. Prat le'shliach bezdin. If that's true, why does the Brisa change topics to speak about a shliach bezdin? Liflog v'lisni b'didah. We should have made a distinction only discussing her. Why are you bringing in a new sugya? All we need is the one sugya of the isha being machzik b'mavushav, and you could make the following distinction. B'med dvarim amurim, 15 lines from the bottom. When do we say that she's going to be chayeves when she had another option? Why did you bring up the case of the shliach bezdin? We don't need that case. I could learn all of the same halachos just from the isha. Don't teach me the case of bezdin. Says the Gemara, that is what I was doing. Hachanami ka'amar. I'm teaching you both dinim together. How so? And granted, we were missing some words in our brisa, so it doesn't. It wasn't rich enough. We were missing something. What's the right way to read our brisa? That's when she could have kicked him, and instead she was machzik b'mavusha. Aval, let's say this was the only method with which she could save her husband's life from the attacker. So then, nase yado k'shliach bezdin p'tura. That's why the Brisa spoke about shliach bezdin, to show she's no different than a shliach bezdin who's pater. That's what the Gemara says. Anyways, still, again, this was our sixth test. We have no Mara Makomos yet to support one Shita or the other in regards to Avid and Ishtina Lenafshe. Let's continue with the last one. Toshma. Let's say I have a field and there is a strip of cement that cuts the middle of my field. The whole community uses my field as a shortcut. I decide enough of this. I want that to be mud, better for my machines and more efficient, whatever the case may be. And what I do is, let's say that my Gemara is the field. Instead of the field, the Rishus Harabim strip that's over here, I move it. I cover this with dirt. I plant some corn, and I move your field, your walking path to the side. That's the case in the Brisa. So says the Gemara, what's the din? Natla v'nasan lahemi natzad, mashanasan nasan. The strip that you gave me to the right of your property, let's call it to the east of your property, whatever the case may be, whatever direction it is, that space is now public, and you can't go back. V'shalo lo higio, and you can't even keep your own field. You're done. Even with the one in the middle, you can't use that either. So says the Gemara. If you want to say that we are allowed to be avid inishtin lenafshe, to take matters into our own hands, then linkot pazra v'lesev, go get a stick, go sit by that place where you want no one to walk, and smack everyone that walks on your field until they sit in line, until they listen. Why not? What do we see from here? It must be that lo avid inishtin lenafshe. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Zvid Mishvei de Rava, no. This case is different. Why is this case different? That perhaps your new path, we're concerned that when you move it, that it might be a windy path. It's the difference between walking on a straight sidewalk and walking the McCormick path, which is much, much longer. Better exercise, But when you're trying to get to Skokie quickly, walk straight. Don't walk on the path. You'll save a lot of time. The Gemara says we had a Gzera. We didn't want him to pick a new path off the center of his field because maybe he'd pick a roundabout path. Rav Misharshia, this is the second to last of the short lines. Rav Misharshia Omer, no, we're not concerned about Gzera, only if the no selam derech hakalton, only if he actually gave a curvy path. That's problematic because you are not allowed to be machriach the tzibor to walk in a roundabout way. Rav Ashi Amar, kol min hatzad derech hakalton hu. What do you think? Every path, even if it's a straight path, is still out of the way for somebody. Yes, you made it easier for the people who live here, but it's further for everybody else. So therefore, no matter what, you're not allowed to do this. Says the Gemara, if this is true, why can't he get his field back? You guys take back your field on the east. I'll reopen the strip of cement in the middle of my field, and Shalom Yisrael. Says the Gemara, you're not allowed to do that. Mishum de Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Meitzar shechzikubo rabim aser lekalkelo. Once you give a pathway to the tzibor, you cannot take it back. Let's imagine that there was a pathway that was open from our shul to the Chesterfield, ready to be used for the public. It's not happening anytime soon. Don't get excited. We've tried 10 times. But let's say we were successful in doing that. Once you establish it as for the tzibur, you can't take it back anymore. The dina. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. That's why our case is not shaykh to the world of Avid Inish. Dina lenafshe. Because the reason why he couldn't take back that property was because he had said it for the tzibur, and that's why it has nothing to do with Avid Inish Dina lenafshe. We actually have one more case. My apologies, I missed my note here. We have one more case, and that is as follows. Tashma, first of the very long lines, Kaf Ches Amud Aleph. Bal Habayis, Sheiniach Peh Mitzad Echad, Uvo Ani Menat Mitzad Acher. I set up my peah to be on the right side of my field, but all the poor people came up and took on the left side of my field. What does the Brisa say? Zeh v'zeh peah. They both count as peah. Says the Gemara, why? The EF shar avid the ain't what's the aleph aleph? What? Oh, the amris. The amris, thank you. The amris avid inishtina lenafshe amai zevezepeya. If I'm allowed to take matters into my own hands, I could just say, guys, you're on the wrong side of the field. Don't eat from the left side of my field. Go to the right side of my field. So why is that not allowed? Linkot pazro v'leisev. Every poor guy who touches a stalk on the left side of the field, beat him up. Take a stick and smack him. You're on the wrong side. Whack. Goodbye. Get out of here. Go to the other side. That's where the peah is. So therefore, what do we see? That maybe it's not avidin ishtina lenafshe. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, no. It doesn't mean that. It means my zev is a peah, the potron mina meiser. Just to say that both of them are in fact pater from meiser. Kidatanya. When a person is mafkir their meiser, hamafkir is karmo v'hishkin. That if a person is mafkir a field and in the morning they harvest, you're chayiv in all of those things, but you're pater from meiser on things that other people take from you. That ends this sugya with no clarity. And lemaisa, we still have a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Nachman in a case where there is no hefsid. Do we say like Rabbi Yehuda that lo avidin ishtina lenafshe? Or do we say like Rav Nachman that avid inish dina lenafshe? As mentioned yesterday, we paskin in Shulchan Aruch that avid inish dina lenafshe. You are allowed to intervene. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Aleph. Nishbiru akado b'reshus harabim. Let's say that your pitcher breaks b'reshus harabim. V'huchlak echad b'mayim, and somebody slips on the water. O shelaka b'charse. Or that there's damage of the pottery. We'll see what all this means in the Gemara. The halacha is that you're chayiv. That's what the Mishnah says. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. B'miskavin chayiv, be'enu miskavin pater. Depends on your intent, and without intent, you're going to be pater. This is a big machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, last line on Kaf Ches Amud Aleph. Lo shanu ela shetinfu kela b'mayim. We're only talking about when your kalim become dirtied in the water, the water's disgusting, your barrel spilled, and someone's kalim gets stained. That's when we say you're chayiv. Aval, top of Kaf Ches Amud Beis. Aval hu atzmo pater. Aval, Rashi adds in the details, huzak hu atzmo, if an adult gets injured, if a man gets injured in the water, he slips, pater, because what actually hurt him? The karka is what hurt him. What made him slip? The water, I agree. But the water's not what damaged him. When you slip on water, what hurts is the concrete. So the Gemara says, grama bini zakin pater. If you spill something, a banana peel, I slip on the banana peel and I break my shoulder on the cement. You're pater. Why? Because I slipped on the banana peel, but the damage wasn't done by the banana peel. The damage was done by the impact on the ground. So therefore, karka olam hazika, so that's what hurt me. All of this is Rav. Rav says that kalim are going to be chayiv if they get dirty, but a person will not be chayiv. And ki amrisa kame de Shmuel, when this was said in front of Shmuel, there's only one person in Shas who says this. That's always going to be Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda learned under Rav and under Shmuel. So whenever we say the phrase, I just said something in the name of Rav, and ki amrisa kame de Shmuel, it's almost always Rabbi Huda. So Shmuel had a problem with this. Amar li, michti, I don't understand. In a case of avno v'sakino umasao, if I have a rock or a knife or a package and it's in a public domain, mi boro lamadnu, that is the same din of bor. Meaning, the case of Rav was where we looked at water like a bor, but we are going to see soon, I made a mistake, that water is, hold on one second, what does Rashi say here? Let's just read inside and we'll see it directly. It says the Gemara, in the case of Shmuel, where it's avno sakino maso mi bor lamadnu, v'chula nani kore bohen shor v'lo adam, chamor v'lo kelim. He says kalim are not part of the consequence because when we're dealing with bor, so by bor, there's no punishment of kalim unless Shitas Rabbi Huda kicks in, which we saw earlier. We'll discuss that later in the day today. So therefore, Rav and Shmuel argue about the kalim. According to Rav, we view it as mamono, like a shore. And because the kalim got hurt, it's no different than a shore hurting it. If it gets dirtied in the water, you're obligated to pay. According to Shmuel, we view the water as a bor. And in a bor, kalim are not chayiv. So says the Gemara, Behani mili le'inyan katala. This is true in regards to murder. But aval le'inyan nizakin, adam chayiv v'kalim p'turim. But when it comes to nizakin, what does Shmuel say? That a man will be chayiv. If a man gets killed, then the baal of the water will be chayiv. The kelim peturim, that is shitas Shmuel machlokes Rav and Shmuel. The Gemara then says, Rav, how would you argue this in regards to this being a bor? When would we say this is true? Hani mili hecha de afgerinhu. That's true what Shmuel is saying in regards to hefker. Aval hecha de lo afgerinhu. But when it's not mufkar, then it's not a bor. In order to make your even, your sakin, and your masa that's in Rishus Harabim into a bor, to change it over from the status of your mammon into a bor b'Rishus Harabim, you have to be mafkirit. So Rav agrees with Shmuel where there's hefker, but he doesn't agree with Shmuel where you still own it. Aval hecha de lo afgarinu mamonohu. So says the Gemara, Masi Rav Oshaya, we have a kasha. We'll soon see that this is a big kasha. The pasuk reads, "V'nafal shama shor o chamor," and we have a drasha. If the pasuk says if a shor or chamor fall into a pit, shor velo adam, the only time you're chayiv is if a shor falls in. But if a person falls in, you're not chayiv. And chamor velo kelim. If a chamor falls in, you're chayiv. But if kelim fall in, you're not. Mikan amru. From here we learn the following principle. About 12 lines down on Kaf Chesamid Beis. Mikan amru nafal asocho shor v'kela v'nishtavru. If a shor falls in, or if kelim fall in, then or chamor v'kela v'niskaru, chayiv ala behema upatra ala kelim. Then you'd be chayiv on the animals, like we saw in the drasha of shor velo adam, chamor velo kelim, but pater ala kelim. Then says the Gemara a very weird line. What is this pasuk similar to? It's similar to la'avno v'sakinu maso shenicham rishus harabim ve'ezeko. It's very similar that if you have an even and sakin and a package in rishus harabim and there's damage that's done, it's just like the pasuk. The Gemara picks up on a quirk and says, Adirabba. How could you say the pasuk is like avno sakino umaso? You should have learned that differently. Adirabba. Ma dome lezeh mipoile. What do you mean to say that this is like that? Ela mai dome lezeh. What do you mean to say that it's dome to it? It means avno v'sakino umaso shenicham dershus harabim v'iziko. No, that this is like the pasuk. The pasuk is not like this. Your precedent is always going to be the pasuk. What is this pasuk similar to? Avno sakino maso. No, avno sakino maso is like the pasuk. So the Gemara just interrupts with that, and then the Brisa picks up again a third of the way down. Lefichach imitiach sluchosa be'even. If you drop a dish on that rock that was left in Rishus Harabim, chayev. So this is the Brisa that Rav Oshaya brought. What's the problem with the Brisa? The problem with the Brisa, says the Gemara, is that Reisha kasha l'Rav, the Seifa kasha l'Shmuel. The Reisha of the Brisa doesn't work for Rav because Rav holds that it is like Mamono. And the Seifa is like Shmuel. It doesn't work for Shmuel because Shmuel holds that it is bor. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. If the Reisha and the Seifa seem to not work like Rav or Shmuel, that means the Reisha and the Seifa don't agree with each other. Says the Gemara, L'tamech, according to you, Tikshi lachi gufa. The Brisa itself has a stira built into it. Reisha pater v'Seifa chayiv in regards to Kalim. So that's a problem. So what does the Gemara say to this? Ela Rav mitaris l'taimei, u'Shmuel mitaris l'taimei. Rav can answer up the stira and the Brisa, and so can Shmuel. And let's go through each of their answers. Rav mitaris l'taimei, b'med dvarim amurim kishehiv kiran, like we already saw. Rav says that once you're mafkir something, it becomes a bor. If you're not mafkir something, then it's still mamono. Aval lohiv kiran chayiv. If you're not mafkir it, then it's not considered a bor b'shus harabim. It's considered your own mamon, and then you're going to be chayiv. And therefore, lefichach hitiach tzluchosa be'even chayiv. If somebody drops their utensils on my rock that's in rishus harabim, I'm chayiv because it's still mamono. If I'm not mafkir that item, then it still belongs to me, and I'm chayiv. Ushmuel mitaritz the time a little bit more than halfway down. What will Shmuel say about the stira and the Brisa? Hashta de amris avno sakinu maso kiboro dami. Once you say that an Evan sakin and a masa, the package that's in Rishus Harabim, is like a bor, then don't worry about the fact that the Brisa says that you're chayiv in kalim in that case. Why not? Because the Rabbi Huda. We know the sheet of Rabbi Huda. We've learned it twice in this Masechta already, as you can see on the side. And that is the Mechayiv al Nizke Kalim Babor. He holds that when it comes to bor, you're chayiv if Kalim fall into the bor. And the Fichach, therefore, because it's a bor, according to Rabbi Huda, Hitiach Sluchosa Be'even chayiv. Meaning the safe of the Brisa is like Rabbi Huda. Shalom al Yisrael, both Rav and Shmuel are able to explain away the Brisa.
I drop a successful on your rock. For that?
Yeah, both according to Rav and Shmuel. They're different reasons. Rav says it's only true if I still own it and I wasn't mafkir it. Shmuel says no matter what, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that any time that a kli is broken by a bor.
It's on purpose and you pay for it.
I mean, you could, but if you do it on purpose, then you're a mazik. So then I wouldn't be obligated.
Oh, okay.
Then you're just a mazik. That's a general rule in Choshen Mishpat. If you damage something intentionally, so let's say I go over to my own car and I break the window to my own car so that I can collect insurance money. No, if the insurance company knew I did that, they wouldn't give me a dime. It's theft. Same thing. So if you break something intentionally on my rock to try to be mechayev me, maybe Bezdin won't know, but you're a thief. You're not allowed to do that. The Gemara now digs into one piece of the Brisa. Amar Rebbe Lazar, 2/3 of the way down. Lo shanu, we had said, Lo shanu ela sheniskal be'even v'nashuf be'even. When did we say in the Brisa that you're chayev if your kli falls and breaks on my rock? Listen to this. That's if you trip on the rock and the utensil falls on the rock. Aval niska bekarka v'nashuf be'even pater. But if you trip on the ground and only your kli breaks on the rock, your pater kiman. Who is this like? This is the lo ki Reb Nasan. This is not like the shita of Reb Nasan, because Reb Nasan elsewhere held that you would be accountable in a case just like that. Ika de Amre, some say that the din is different and that in fact we do hold like Rabbi Nasan as follows. Amar Rebbe Lazar lo tema. Don't say beniskal be'even v'nishof be'even hu demechayev. Don't say that the only time you're chayiv is when you trip on the rock and when your utensil falls on the rock. Aval niskal b'karka v'nashu be'evan pater. But if you kick your toe on the ground and fall, and then your utensil falls on the rock, you'd be pater. That's not true. Ella afilu niskal b'karka v'nashu be'evan chayiv. Even if you kick the ground before the evan and then you drop your utensil on the evan, you're still going to be chayiv keman kireb nosa. That brings us to the two dots. I hope we're able to finish before Mariv. Let's jump into the next sugya. We had said in our Mishnah, if you'll look at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Aleph, the Mishnah there spoke about a double case. We said nishbir akado birshus harabim v'huchlak echad b'mayim o shalaka b'charseh. The pitcher broke in Rishus Harabim, and two things happened. You slipped on the water, or something happened with the cheres, with the pottery. And we had said by the Tanakama that you're chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda argued only b'miskavein. So now we need to figure out what b'miskavein actually means. And we're at the two dots, 10 lines from the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Beis. Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'miskavein chayiv hechidam b'miskavein. How do we define kavana? Amar Rabba b'miskavein lehorida lamata miktefo. He was lowering it from his shoulder. That act of lowering it from his shoulder is what we define as kavana. And therefore, if you are doing that action and then it slipped, then the baal will be chayiv. Amar le Abaye michlal, that implies the mechayiv Rav Meir afilu nifshara. If Rabbi Yehuda holds that kavana is defined as lowering the package from your shoulder, it must be that Rav Meir holds your chayiv even when it's on your shoulder, which implies that Rav Meir would say you're chayiv even if it just disintegrates on your shoulder and you did nothing wrong. Amar Le, says the Gemara, correct, you've learned Rav Meir the right way in Mechayiv Haya Rav Meir afilu ozno biyado. Even if the handles of the container are still in your hand. Imagine the scene. I'm holding a utensil on my head. I've got the turban on. I've got something on my head, and I'm holding the handle of the jug right here. And all of a sudden, the handle breaks off. I didn't do anything different. It just was a bad jug. It was a lemon. The halacha is according to Rav Meir, you're chayiv if that breaks. That's considered kavana according to Rav Meir. Says the Gemara, Amai, why would Rav Meir ever hold that? Anushu, that's an ones. The ones rachmana patre. Why would you say you're accountable for something that's completely out of your control? Where do we know that you're pater from an ones? That when it comes to a woman who was nebuch violated, that she has no culpability, no liability at all in that scenario. She didn't choose it, and she would have wished it never would have happened. Maybe we would say, maybe we would only say by ktala, by murder, by accidental murder, that's the case. But in our case, maybe we would have said that even with an ones, you're still going to be chayiv. That can't be, because 2 lines from the bottom, Vehatanya, we have a brisa. Nishbir akado velo salka. If I break a pitcher and don't clean the pieces up, nafal gimalo, my camel falls velo he'amido, and I don't stand him up. Here we have a machlokes, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Meir mechayev behezekon. Rav Meir says that any damages caused either by case 1 of nishbir akado velo salka or nafal gimalo velo he'amido, you're chayev in that. And the Chachamim Omrim pater. They say you're pater midine adam v'chayiv b'dine shamayim. The brisa continues. Umodim Chachamim. The Chachamim who are of the lenient opinion that you're pater midine adam, they agree lechumra to Rav Meir that you're chayiv in the following case: the avno sakinu maso shenichan berosh gago v'naflo beruach metzuya v'yiziko shu chayiv. They agree that if I have a collection of knives sitting on the top of my roof, and I position them in such a way where the lightest breeze will knock them off, that's on me. That's normal behavior. That's on me. However, on the flip side, umod Rav Meir l'Rabbanan, the rabbis agree. The Rav Meir agrees with the Rabbanan lekula. B'mala kankanin alagag. If someone who puts vessels on top of a roof, almanas lenagvan, just so they can dry out. V'naflu beruach she'eino mitzuviziko shu pater. Everyone agrees that you're pater in that case. So what do we see? That everyone agrees, even Rav Meir with a pure ones, everyone agrees. So therefore, how can we understand Rav Meir, which we implied on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Beis, who would define one to be chayiv even if the pitcher that was on your shoulder was never lowered from your shoulder. It has to be ones rachmana patre. So therefore, the Gemara gives a sophisticated explanation of our Mishnah and of the Brisa we just learned. We're on Chav Tesamud Aleph, 5 lines down. We have another 15 lines or so to go. We will make it Yom Hashem before Mariv. Says the Gemara, El Amar Abaye Betarte Pligi. We are talking about 2 moments in time. There are 2 different machlokos of Meir and Rabbi Huda. One is Pligi B'Shas Nefila, right when something falls, and one is Upligi La'achar Nefila. One is talking about a machlokes after everything fell. Pligi B'Shas Nefila B'Niskal Posheya. We're talking about a case where there's a machlokes about someone who trips and whether or not he's a posheya. If you trip, is it your fault? Are you just a bad walker? You're just not paying attention. Do we say Mar Savar Niskal Posheyahu, Rav Meir, or do we say Umar Savar Niskal La Posheyahu? And that's one machlokes Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. And here's the second one, a quarter of the way down on Chav Testament Aleph. Pligi La'achar Nafila B'Mafkir Nezaka. Maybe there's another machlokes Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, a different one, in regards to after something that fell, where we're being mafkir that item after it fell. Mar Savar Mafkir Nezak of Chayav. One shita, Rav Meir holds that if you're mafkir your nizak in your property, that which was damaged out there, if you left it there, you're chayav for anything that happens. Umar Savar Potter. Says the Gemara, Umimai. Where did you get this from? That there's 2 moments of machlokes. One which is pligi b'shas nefila, and one which is pligi la'achar shas nefila. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down, midikatani tarte, because our Mishnah at our brisa at the bottom of the previous page has 2 languages. What does it say? I'm sorry, the brisa, not the brisa. Our Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Aleph says huchlak echad b'mayim o shelaka b'charseha. There are 2 cases. One is when the water was spilled and you didn't clean it up, and the other when there were shards of pottery and someone got injured. You might have thought hainuhach. You might have thought that these 2 things were the same thing, and the Mishnah was just giving 2 examples. No, elolav hachi kamar. These are 2 cases. Huchlak echad b'mayim b'shas nefila o shelaka b'charseha le'achar nefila. They were talking about different moments in time, and therefore Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah are having one machlokes, and Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in the brisa are having a different one. Says the Gemara, umidemas nisan bitarte. If it's true that our Mishnah on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Aleph is talking about 2 cases, one which is pligi, what are the 2 cases? B'shas nefila, and one is la'achar nefila. It must also be true b'brisa nami bitarte. There also must be 2 cases in the brisa. Says the Gemara, Bishlamakado, I could understand the brisa at the very bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Beis, where it says Nishbarakado v'losalka. I could understand Mishkachas la o b'shas nefila o la'achar nefila. I could have explained that case as before damage or after damage. Before damage is once the kli is broken, but no one has gotten hurt yet, and after damage is after someone gets hurt. Ella, the second case of that brisa, which can be found on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Beis, Ella Gimalo, when it comes to my camel that sat down, Bislam al-achar nefila, mishkachas la b'mafkir nivlaso. I could be mafkir the gamal after it dies. I could leave it there, and then of course I'll understand that someone can get hurt. Ella b'shas nefila hechi mishkachas la. What's a case scenario where b'shas nefila at the time the animal was falling down? Where is that scenario where there's any damages? So the Gemara says 2/3 of the way down. Amar Rav Acha kigon de avra maya derech sharasa. We have this animal walking through water, through overflow water, and it's walking through waters that are really not safe for it to walk through. Dinara, and that's where something bad happened. Says the Gemara, hey chidami. What's the case where you're walking your camel through an overflow? The Gemara says, Idiika darka achrina. If there's another way that the camel could have walked, you're a fool. Posheahu, that's on you. And ideleka darka achrina anusu. And ones rachmana patre. If there was no other way for him to walk, we should have been fine. The Gemara says, and with this we'll conclude, Ella, what's the case where we could understand our brisa as having both a case of b'shas nefila and la'achar nefila? Says the Gemara, mishkachas la de'iskil, where the balabayis tripped, and then the camel tripped on him, the iskila be gmala, and therefore we could understand the brisa on the bottom of Kaf Ches Amud Beis, just like we can understand our Mishnah, that there's a double machlokes happening. one in regards to B'shas Nefila, when the initial damage happened, and one in regards to Achar Nefila. On Shabbos at 2:50, we'll pick up with the word mafkir, about 8 lines from the bottom on Chavtes Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.